the discretion the police have, I think it's fair to say that it's more likely that someone's going to get charged with riot if they're engaged in an anti-police protest.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We've been following very closely the movement of the anti-protest bill in the Alabama legislature, HB2. It passed the state house a couple of weeks ago and has gone to the Senate for consideration. We did get word from a Republican state senator, actually, saying that it has zero chance of passing the Senate in its current form and that there is not an appetite to fix it. So we're pretty hopeful that it is effectively dead for this session, but this is not the first time that this bill has been introduced, and I suspect it's not the last time. So I did want to talk about it at least one more time, because the author of the bill, we had the sponsor of the bill on. He's not the author of the bill. Maybe we can talk about that. But we had the sponsor of the bill on last week, and he made some assertions that we very much disagreed on. So we wanted to spend a few minutes evaluating those claims with an expert, because if you want to play devil's advocate for the bill, you could say, well, you and Adam, you're just like know-nothing regular working folk, right? And this is a big, important state legislator that is disagreeing with you, and he's the one that sponsored the bill, so surely he knows more than you. Laws are written weird, and presumably people that write the laws would have a better idea at how those laws are going to be implemented. So even though the readings, they do seem clear to us, we wanted to get a bit of external feedback. So we're bringing out the big guns. We've got the former president of the National Lawyers Guild. He is also the current co-chair of the Alabama chapter, and he's sometimes a legal observer at protests. David Gespass. David, thanks for taking the time to join us today. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, although I question the idea that I'm an expert, but I'll do the best I can.
Well, I mean, look, if the president of the National Lawyers Guild is not an expert in the law, then, I don't know. Certainly you more know than me, and we'll leave it at that at least. So let's start, generally speaking. One of the frustrations for me was that he cited as a need for this bill the dropping of the charges associated with protests in 2020. And my contention was that the changing of the law does not change how the DA is going to enforce it, right? The DA, there were charges on the books that presumably a properly motivated DA could have pursued, but the DA did not want to pursue those for whatever reason. Some of the times the charges were bogus and wouldn't have gone through, and there were some that you probably could have gotten a conviction on, but the DA didn't want to do that. And so it seemed to me that a large part of his problem was just the DA, that he wants to elect a different DA. Am I reading that right?
Pretty much. These were actually city charges. So it was the Birmingham City Prosecutor's Office and the city that made those determinations. And basically, there was a question about whether the curfew was even reasonable in the first place. And
right.
So that the idea of, prosecuting 75 people or something like that who didn't do anything other than show up was obviously anathema to the city. And that, truth be told, I would guess that if this law were in place, the city would be even more reluctant to do it because there'd be mandatory jail time.
Right. Right. And he kept on and kept on as if it's not illegal to burn down buildings, and kept on referring to that. But the charges were all for, even the people that were originally arrested, those charges were none of those were for destruction. Like they didn't catch the people that were presumably they didn't catch the people that were actually involved in, to the extent that property damage and arson happened. They didn't even catch those people. So, again, with that, it seems to me that his problem was not with the law, but with the ability of police officers to find who was responsible for the damage.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And it's also the fact that whatever property damage did take place, took place after the protest had ended, when the mayor said, give me 48 hours and I'll get rid of the monument. And people went on their way. And evidently, I was there for the demonstration, but I left after that. But evidently, after that happened, there was some, property damage here and there that was carried out by people who may have been participating in the demonstration, may not have been, but there was no demonstration going on at that time. So there's just individuals.
Right.
And the people, the people that got arrested were arrested for curfew violations, which had nothing to do with the property damage, other than some coincidence in time.
Sure. And so let's get into the nitty-gritty then, because he claimed that, and this was astonishing to me, but he claimed that to even be arrested and thus subject to the 24-hour hold for rioting, the cops would have to be able to prove that you damaged property or caused harm to a person. Let's play that clip about rioting, Adam.
I do not want somebody who is peacefully protesting being arrested. But when did we stop holding people accountable for noncompliance? The mayor of Birmingham had a curfew violation in play. There was lawful orders given on a bullhorn. We had undercover officers in the crowd so they can testify that they heard it clearly. And then some people refused to leave. One young lady said, I did nothing but sit on the bench. Well, no, there's a curfew violation in play. We've told you an hour and a half every 15 minutes that people will be arrested if you don't disperse. And then you didn't walk away from where the buildings were starting to be looted and set on fire. Mm-hmm. You walked towards it. So
sure. So she should be locked in a cage for 30 days. Okay. Glad that we agree.
No. That bill don't say that, brother. Don't listen. If you don't agree with me, don't add stuff to it. No, it does not. Let me finish what I'm saying.
Sure.
I'm asking you that question. If this person, where there's a violation of a curfew violation, a lawful order to disperse, is headed towards the rioting situation, what do you expect police officers to do? To put their lives in danger? My question is, they would be arrested for failure to disperse under the bill I got, or curfew violation, and neither of that results in a 30-day or a 24-hour hold.
All right, so there we have him. It seems like he's even shifting in that argument that he gives there, because I'm talking to him about his bill, which is a riot bill, quote unquote, and he brings up this woman who's just walking towards, damage, and his implication is that she's going to go participate in the riot, but so far she's just walking there. And so I say, okay then, so what you're advocating we do is that she be convicted of rioting. And he's saying, no, that wouldn't happen. You couldn't do that. She would be arrested for violating a curfew. How does that grok with your reading? Well, and I'll just read the bill again, because he kept telling me to read the bill, and I kept trying to read the bill to him, and he didn't seem to want to accept that. But so his pulling straight from the most recent, and I checked the most recent version of his bill, the definition of riot is, quote, the assemblage of 5 or more persons engaging in conduct which creates an immediate danger of and or results in damage to property or injury to persons. A person commits the crime of riot if, after receiving an order to disperse by a law enforcement officer, or when in violation of a curfew, the person intentionally participates in a riot. So, given that definition and his argument, I mean, how does that track with what he's saying and then what's actually in the bill in your mind?
Okay, well, I think there are two separate things. One could be arrested for failure to disperse, which is what he sort of switched to in the middle of that. If you get an order to disperse and there's no riot as defined by the bill, then it's only failure to disperse. If, however, there is a riot as is defined by the bill, then you can be arrested for participating in it. And you face the 24-hour hold and you face the 30-day minimum. I think it's worth looking at what the current definition of riot is and looking at the differences. Alabama right now has a statute that says a person commits the crime of riot if, with 5 or more other persons, he wrongfully engages in tumultuous and violent conduct and thereby intentionally or recklessly causes or creates a grave risk of public terror or alarm. Now, what the bill does is change a lot of that and the really critical parts of it. First of all, it says if you're engaging in a riot, failure to disperse. It does not say the order to disperse has to be lawful. So if you get an unlawful order to disperse, you're still subject to prosecution for that. Secondly, it says intentionally participating in the riot as opposed to intentionally engaging in the conduct. So if there are, 50 people and you're at the back of the line and there's an order to disperse, even assuming it's lawful, and somebody at the front of the line throws a rock, at least by the terms of the statute, you can be subject to being charged with riot and subject to the mandatory hold and 30 days. Now, that, of course, is up to the discretion of the individual officers who are involved. And that, I think, raises another question, which is who is this bill actually aimed at? It's not like we saw something like this because of, protests and attacks on journalists at Trump rallies, or in fact, beating up on my friends at a Trump rally. It's not like we saw this because counter-protesters in Florence against my friends who were protesting the really grotesque monument in front of the courthouse, the Confederate monument in front of the courthouse, get attacked by some guy in a motorcycle. No, it's because of protesters about Confederate symbols in the wake of the George Floyd torture and murder. So we really can't even trust that the police are going to use their discretion in an even-handed way, regardless of the protestations. The entire thrust of the bill is to attack the Black Lives Matter protesters, to attack those who were protesting police violence, police murders, who were protesting Confederate symbols. And given the discretion the police have, I think it's fair to say that it's more likely that someone's going to get charged with riot if they're engaged in an anti-police protest.
Oh, but now, come on, David. You don't trust the police?
Oh, I trust the police. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm glad that y'all brought up the current definition, though. This is Adam jumping in because I was telling Jacob before the show started that after that interview, I even went back and reread it again and again to see maybe I was missing something. I even showed other people the current definition on the books. And, I'm not a lawyer, but as a layperson, that current definition looks a lot more clear and enforceable and, understandable compared to what he's trying to change, because I know he kept bringing up that he's trying to update the definition. Right. Well, in Alabama, that's not that crazy of a proposition because we do have a lot of very unclear and backwards language in our law. But I really don't see how that is this case. It looks to me that it is going to make the definition much worse. And as you said, David, I think you're right on with in terms of who this is prompted by. And inevitably, should this law pass or this bill become law, we know the discretion will be targeted one way versus the other. Right. And I don't think any of us could assume that rich folks will be targeted the same way as poor folks or that, the striking miners on a picket line will be treated the same way as the bosses on the other side and on and on and on. So, yeah, just really appreciate you bringing up that current definition and as well what really is prompting this.
Yeah. And the next thing that I wanted to get to was the funding. Reading again from his bill, quote, a person commits the crime of inciting to riot if he or she commands, solicits, incites, funds, urges, or otherwise aids and abets another person to engage in a riot or aggravated riot. He actually used, and you said that you have like some doubts that this actually happened, but he actually used the example of somebody when talking about the need for this bill, somebody sitting in the Birmingham jail with a bag of cash, bailing people out. But then when I pressed him on it, he was like, oh no, you would never be arrested for contributing to a bail fund. Let's play that clip, Adam.
I mean, specifically about the funding, I mentioned that I gave money to bail people out of prison. I think that you could not unreasonably, under this definition, say that I'm funding a riot. Do you believe that I would be put? Do you believe that it would be right for me to be thrown in a cage for 30 days?
No, absolutely not. That's your right to do that, and there's no officer I know would take a charge like that to a DA or a DA that would give you a warrant on that.
So, what do you think? What is your response to that, David?
Well, if he keeps raising that example of someone sitting in jail with a bag of cash, which may have happened. I hear that it's possible it may have happened once, right? So the question then becomes, why is the definition as broad as it is? If you make it explicit that you cannot go and pay a cash bond for somebody who was arrested for rioting to get that person back out on the street to re-engage, as if that could possibly happen, because frankly, it takes several hours to get out under the best of circumstances. Right. That's one thing. Contributing to a bail fund ahead of time is something else. And that then gets to another issue, which is really a problem, which is prosecutors, DAs particularly, who get elected, who want to play to the electorate, and will, may decide in election year to prosecute some people who either contribute to or create a bail fund to assist protesters. And then, and that's not an unreasonable definition. That's not an unreasonable interpretation. It's unreasonable to do, right? It's unreasonable to charge somebody for that. But it's not unreasonable to interpret the statute, the proposed statute, to say that that's the basis of a charge. And,
I was going to say, I mean, I think you're hitting on it's so broad in terms of the funding. It treats someone who literally buys guns and ammunition and weapons for a quote unquote riot the same as if, someone who is contributing to a bail fund. And that's just insane.
Yeah.
And his defense constantly seemed to be that no officer would bring you up on this charge, no DA would prosecute it. And it's like you mentioned, given the strictness of this law, maybe that's true, but also, like you mentioned, it could happen. This is the law allows these. If this bill became law, it would allow these things to happen under a properly motivated DA or city prosecutor. Sure. And that's the issue. And that's what, he didn't seem to want to recognize that.
Yeah. Just remember that, Alabama has this judicial that may still be on the books as unconstitutional, this judicial override for capital cases in which somebody is convicted of capital murder and the jury recommends life without parole. A judge can still impose the death cell penalty. And the statistics show that during election years, judges use that judicial override more frequently than they do when they're not up for re-election. So the idea that a prosecutor may do this just to play to the electorate is not that far-fetched.
Right.
And by the way, I just mentioned one other thing. So, he kept talking about how he was working across the aisle, and has made all these changes in this bill to accommodate the objections of Democrats. I checked yesterday, and not a single Democrat voted for this bill as it evolved.
Right. Yeah, that's important to, because that was strange to me. His focus on ostensibly bipartisanship in a bill that passed through the state house along totally party lines.
Yeah.
And with not only, it wasn't like they just voted against it, there was vehement opposition. There was very, very passionate speeches from the Democrats about the danger that this bill presented. And so to I don't want to accuse him of saying something that he didn't do, but to say that I spent all this time talking to Democrats, it just doesn't. It's not evident in the outcomes, and we can leave it at that.
Right. It obviously didn't work very well.
Right. We've been talking to David Gespass, former president of the National Lawyers Guild. David, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Have a good day.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.